What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So as y'all know, today is indeed Wednesday, which means the new summit is now live here at Motorfest. With that, it's going to be Risk Everything, and that's going to give us the Rocket Company Nitro. If you are wondering, no, that's not going to be a new one. That's going to be an old vanity from the Crew 2. We're then going to have the Gordon Murray Automotive in gold, some plain parts, and also 5,000 spare parts. After that, we are going to have the Fury Summit here, which I would say this one does look pretty dope. At least we can confidently say the RX-7 Red Fury actually looks different, and this car is going to be unique compared to the regular one. I am excited for that at least. If we're going to be looking at this summit, it's going to be primarily Street Tier 2, and also one Street Tier 1 event, which I would say does make sense. I mean, it is a Street Tier 2 vehicle, so yeah, we're going to have a Slalom, a Speed Trap, and also an Escape down there, which you're going to have to use the Honda S2000. Besides that, though, let's head back into the summit here, guys, and take a look at this. I gotta admit, I feel like Risk Everything isn't going to be that bad, but then again, with the rewards and stuff like that, I can kind of tell why a lot of these summits recently keep going down in the player counts, and I have a feeling this one might end up following that. Besides that, though, we're going to have a long jump. For this one, you will have to use an Alpha GP car. For me, I did end up using the Ivory Tower AGP. Is this the best one? Probably not. The Red Bull RB14 and the Disruption Edition are probably better, and that way you could probably get a tad farther, but I was testing it, no Nitro Chemist set. I got 1,000 yards on that, and to be honest, I'm kind of okay with it. We're then going to have a Bullseye after that. This one's going to be very straightforward. It's going to be in the Gymkhana Park. You could pretty much use any vehicle of your liking, and you could pretty much use any vehicle of your choice on this. You could use a motocross bike like I did, a hypercar, rally, Alpha GP, pretty much whatever you feel like using, and you don't even need a score breaker. I got 155,000 points using a regular Nitro Chemist set with skilled, and it was basically just fine. We're then going to have a low altitude, guys. I would say this is very easy to do. I did end up using the Pilatus PC21. I basically started, went toward the ground, followed the road, and pretty much went straight, got 157,000 points. It is honestly very straightforward. Besides that, though, we are going to have 4 loaned events in this, and no, none of them are going to have modifiers, which I would say is a good thing, at least the Gymkhana one. We're then going to have a plane race and a racing McLaren Senna GTR event. This one is going to be one of the Gymkhana events with like these slider things you can like pretty much skateboard over, but do not worry, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You basically race as it's going to be a regular event. There's no modifier. I don't know if it's messed up like they were supposed to add it, but who knows. Either way, this event is pretty simple. The McLaren Senna GTR is going to be a decent car overall for a track like this one. We're then going to have the plane event here, which is going to be with the Edge 540 V3. Funny part is, I do admit the plane events in this summit, which I mean with this one and the jet event, did remind me something of the Crew 2 with how they did it back on there, and it kind of makes me wonder why there's not going to be more events like that to mix certain things up. It's kind of odd. Like, they are going to have some cool events in the summits, but why are they just in the summits? I feel like the game could really benefit from certain races like this in the actual game itself. Overall, though, these events are going to be very simple, guys. With the plane itself, the Zivko, pretty much follow each objective using your nitrous, and that's pretty much it. For the jet event, though, it's also going to be fairly similar. The big thing is probably getting used to the handling. To be honest, I could probably go back in and do a tad better on the jet event, but I honestly don't really have a big desire to do so. I might, but to be honest, I'm not too sure if I feel like doing it. We're then going to have a Monster Truck Loaned event here. Now, this is going to be the event you guys had to do with the Raptor, where you pretty much can't run into the cones and stuff like that. So, yeah, this one is probably going to be fairly interesting. The biggest thing is on the 4th and 5th level, aka the 4th and 5th lap. You're going to be going over 60 miles an hour. So make sure on the bigger turn, you're probably going to be turning a tad earlier. That way you can make it around that turn and not hit as many traffic cones. Either way, though, this event is also pretty easy to do. On the bottom, though, we're going to have an Alpha GP loaned event down here, guys. Again, I would say most of the events here are going to be fairly straightforward. Both of the loaned events, you are going to have to use the vehicle the game does end up giving you, and overall I would say the biggest thing is getting used to the car you are using. But with these, they're both going to be off-roading. That's something I had to point out, and that might end up being something players might like, and they also might not be the biggest fan of it. I feel like it's probably going to be a bit split there, to be honest, but they are pretty much putting off-road tires on a Red Bull F1 car, then boom, pretty much jump down a mountain with it. Makes a lot of sense, right? Overall, though, with the off-road tires, I don't know if they changed the Alpha GP vehicles for it, But if they did, I would kind of like to be able to do that. That way my tires would count, and I would totally off-road them because it kind of makes it a bit entertaining. But overall, though, these events are going to be fairly simple. The big thing I can say is be a tad careful with how you do end up turning the F1 car. That way you don't start spinning or something or sliding. That can be a big issue and make you lose a ton of speed. Overall, though, that's pretty much going to do it for Risk Everything in this summit. I would say most of the events, I gotta admit, were pretty fun when it does come to the mixed up part of it, but I just wish the biggest thing with this game, and honestly they really need to do it, is to really improve these rewards.